All right. Okay. My name is Peter Brace. I'm chair of the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee. I want to call this meeting to order for Tuesday, July 23rd, 2024. I'm going to read the script for the abbreviated script for remotely conducting open meetings. Good morning. This meeting is being audio and video recorded. Please be aware that other people may be able to see you, and take care not to share your device's screen. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. Please silence all devices and phones. For items with public comment, after committee members have finished their discussion on an agenda item, the chair may afford members of the public who wish to speak up to 3 minutes. Members of the public who wish to speak must state their name and any affiliations. And to give public comment, you must be recognized by the chair and speak through the chair. There's to be no crosstalk with others in attendance. In the interest in efficient use of our time, please speak through the chair. To be recognized for making a public comment, use the raise hand feature by clicking on the reactions tab at the bottom of your Zoom screen and then click on the raise hand button. When you finished your comment, please click the lower hand button. It's important for me to note that, that the CRAC isn't required by law to take public comment. We do so because we need your invaluable input. We view public comment as a privilege, so please remain respectful in your comments and do not disparage others or the members of this committee. Okay. At this time, we'll take public comment on issues that are not on this agenda.
Sorry, Peter, a roll call vote for, roll call for the attendees who are here, and then the speakers.
Okay. So for the committee, Tim Brain.
Here.
John Kitchener.
Here.
Gary Beller.
Here.
Doug Rose.
Here.
Rachel Freeman.
Here.
Where are we here? Joanna Roach.
Here.
Matt Fee. You there, Matt?
Here.
Okay.
You hear me? Yeah.
Yep,
Hello.
can hear you.
Hello. Hi.
And, okay, so anticipated speakers, Trevor Johnson.
Here.
And
Good.
Allison Kapiki.
Here.
Okay. Kelly Van. Hold on. I'm not done yet. Kelly Van Balen.
I'm here.
Okay. And then who else, Leah? I think that's it, right?
Julie Conroy.
Okay, Julie Conroy.
I'm here.
Okay.
And then Michelle McDonald, but I'm not sure if she'll be speaking or
Here.
Okay. All right, very good.
not. And Mark Willett.
And Mark Willett.
And I am here.
Okay, great. That's everybody. So public comment, if you have something to say that has nothing to do with today's agenda, you can have 3 minutes. We will not discuss it. If it warrants an agenda item, we may put it on a future agenda. But go ahead. If anyone, please use the raise the hand feature. Identify yourself and your affiliation if you have something to say.
Peter, it's Deanne. I can't find my raise the hand button.
I'm kicking you off then.
I do have just a very brief public comment, please.
Yes.
And first of all, 2 things. I apologize that my video is not working.
And
Deanne,
Deanne,
yes.
who do you represent?
Oh, I am the administrative coordinator for the Nantucket Coastal Conservancy.
Okay.
And I did want to also just say hello to Trevor and that it's good to see him after all of this time. Our comments are 2, and they're very brief. One is to please draw your attention to the memorandum we sent to the Conservation Commission and copied you in. It's in your packet, and we thank Leah for including it. And it just draws your attention as focus
You're breaking up, Deanne.
to the public beach below the bluff in Sconset. Out here in Squam, Peter, that could be part of the reason. So we just wanted to bring this to your attention. While the Conservation Commission wrestled with what to do with the geotubes, the current geotubes have no mitigation, no maintenance, no monitoring, and the harmful impacts on the public beach seaward of the geotubes are just increasing. And then the second item we wanted to bring to your attention and suggest that maybe you might want to put this on your agenda. As you know, the town engaged with Arcadis in January of 2022 to do a relocation project for Northern Baxter Road. And that contract has been amended 2 times. The most recently by the select board at a meeting in June. And that contract was extended another year at an additional cost of $248,000, which brings the total amount of money spent on just the planning for the relocation to about $1.2 million. We have asked for a copy of the contract amendment just so that we have ideas of sort of what are the deliverables and what is the new time frame. And we're waiting to receive that. As you know, this is the first kind of large scale planning for relocation on Nantucket, and clearly it's running into some delays and it's costing quite a bit of money. So we thought this might be a good item for you to put on your agenda to just have an update from the town officials who are working on it by way of information, so you can keep yourself informed about what's happening or not happening. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Deanne. Okay. Approval of, or is there any other public comment? Okay, hearing none. Approval of the minutes. May 14th, 2024, May 28th, 2024, and June 25, 2024. Do we have any changes to any of these minutes? Any corrections, any additions?
Matt Fee, I'll move approval, Peter.
Okay, Matt, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, moved by Matt Fee, seconded by Tim Brain. All is in favor, roll call vote. I'll take John Kitchener,
Aye.
Gary Beller,
Aye.
Doug Rose.
Aye.
Matt Fee,
Aye.
Rachel Freeman,
Aye.
Joanna Roach.
Aye.
Do I have everybody? Tim Brain, sorry.
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Okay. Okay. Introduction to the new planning board representative, John Kitchener.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Well, just quickly, I've been a year-round resident on the island since the early 2000s. I was born in the UK, but became a US citizen a few years back. I fully retired from my businesses in the end of 2021 and started my public service commitments, which started with I became an at-large member of the short-term rental work group back in 2022, appointed by the select board. In 2023, again, appointed by the select board as the alternate member for the planning board. And then this year in May, I was appointed to a full planning board member by the select board and planning board members. Since joining the planning board, I'm also a member of the NP and EDC, and enjoying that. I am still very much involved in trying to bring some regulation to the short-term rental situation. I was a member of one of the groups that crafted the select board article, which is a great one. That'll be voted on in September, and we believe it's an excellent compromise of both sides of the aisle. I would ask you, if I may, sometime between now and September 17th, to please read Article 1, the Select Board short-term rental article. And if you agree with it, please show up and vote for it, and encourage others to do the same. Every vote is going to count in this very polarized situation. Just to finish up, my main goal on the board, on the CRAC board, is to look for opportunities for CRAC and the planning board to support each other's initiatives. At this point, it's a little bit early on, so I'm not sure what those initiatives might be. But whatever that comes up, I'll do my best to pursue them as they arise. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
All right, thanks very much, John, and welcome to our committee.
Glad to be here.
Okay. Okay, appointment of officers. I have the information that says that Sarah Boyce is willing to continue as vice chair, and I'm willing to continue as chair, unless anybody wants to challenge me. Don't all jump up at once. That's all right. I'm good with it.
I make a motion that we accept both of those as chair and vice chair.
We also need, sorry, Matt, we also need somebody to volunteer to be secretary.
I was doing the easy stuff first.
Okay,
I'll second Matt's motion.
okay, that's fine. Matt motioned to approve the chair and the vice chair. Doug seconded. Roll call vote. Gary Beller. Can't hear you, Gary. Okay.
Aye.
John Kishner.
Aye.
Doug Rose.
Aye.
Rachel Freeman.
Aye.
Tim Brain.
Aye.
Matt Fee.
Aye.
Joanna Roach.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Okay. The fun one. Who's it going to be? We got to have a secretary. Yeah, guys, we got to have a secretary. Someone's got to volunteer.
Can I ask you a question?
There could be co-secretaries too.
Right. You take turns. What's your question, Tim?
Could someone outline specifically what the duties of the secretary are?
You're basically taking the minutes and giving them back to us. And from somebody who's done the minutes for SHAB for eons and does the minutes for the Harbor Plan Action Committee, they can be pretty much what you want. You know, you can just do the decisions if you want, provide basic information. They can be detailed. It serves us better if they're more detailed. What I do when I do minutes is I'm taking notes throughout, but not serious notes. And then I watch the YouTube video. So essentially watching the meeting and preparing the minutes that way. And I tend to be more wordy and more detailed because I was a reporter once. And so I just can't help myself. I just think that it's better if there's a better record, but you don't have to follow that at all. You just do the basic stuff. So like Rachel said, we can have two. So if someone else would like to volunteer, and Tim, if you were into it, then we'd have two people that could fill in for each other as they worked it out.
I'm willing to give it a try.
Okay, Rachel, your hand is up.
I was, I was gonna say, I'm willing to give it a try. Is it possible to split it 3 ways, having been co-chair or co-secretary before, or is that off the table?
I don't know. I think 2 is enough.
Okay. I could help if there's absolutely nobody else. Minutes are not my forte, but I'm know they need to get done. So,
Okay. Awesome. Thank you. Thanks to
Yeah, I
both of you.
can't guarantee how good I'll be. but-
There's no way you can fail us except not doing them. So, okay. Can we get a motion from somebody for this, for Rachel and for Rachel Freeman and Tim Brain to do the minutes? To be secretaries.
I so move.
Gary moved. Second from somebody?
I'll second. It's Matt.
Second from Doug Rose. Okay, roll call vote. John Kitchener,
Aye.
Gary Beller,
Aye.
Rachel Freeman,
I,
Doug Rose,
Aye, and thanks, guys.
Tim Brain,
Aye.
Matt Fee.
Aye.
Okay, and Joanna Roach.
Aye, and thank
And
So
Chair
I need to
votes
start
aye.
taking notes.
Okay. Which one of you guys wants to do it today?
I can do it tonight.
Okay. Thanks, Rachel. Okay, so get that fun stuff out of the way. Number 7, conversation with Mark Willett, Director of Wannacomet Water Company, about the impacts of sea level rise on Nantucket's aquifer. All you, Mark.
Thanks for having me. As you guys know, that's the most important thing. It just isn't the infrastructure for us that we have to worry about in placing hydrants with the sea level rises, but as sea level rises, the groundwater level is going to rise. And it's not equal. It's actually a lesser sea level rise creates a greater ground level rise. So it's not a 1-to-1 movement. What that does is can create where there aren't wetlands now, could be wetlands, that has localized groundwater flow could change as the sea level rises and the groundwater level rises, creating different wetlands and localized flow patterns that are different than what we see now. Luckily for us, our wells are centrally located in the middle of the island, so it might not be an immediate impact, but eventually it could be an impact. The change in flow directions with everything that's going on with the contaminants we're looking at, like PFAS at the airport area, Tom's Way, and different locations throughout the island, if you start changing localized groundwater flow, those contaminants could move places that they weren't going to move previously. So it's kind of a challenging thing for our model where we have we're working on a 3D groundwater model that's being finalized, where we can look at what happens if in certain areas, say Washington Street, Easton, Hulbert Avenue, that groundwater comes up, those wetlands and ponded areas get bigger. And what does that do to the flow direction of our aquifer on the edges of the island? That would be the largest impact for us. So it's not just the utilities and the distribution system itself, but the groundwater and the localized groundwater flow direction. That's our biggest concern with sea level rise. And it's going to be hard to predict that with our models because we really don't know what those impacts will be. And another large concern is if that happens, then the stormwater has to be collected. Stormwater drainage is improved. And for us at Wannacomet, stormwater is hugely important because that's just recharging back into our aquifer. So when we install catch basins to collect this water, we're giving it a pathway down to the aquifer. If we have to add more because of sea level rise, groundwater level rises, now we're adding more stormwater drainage in places that we didn't have it before, that was naturally just going in instead of collecting it and mounding it in a catch basin location or several leach pits or even leach fields and trenches and what they're doing now with the roads, using a lot of those big infiltration basins to take care of that. When you do a big infiltration basin to take care of like the stormwater in a parking lot like Stop and Shop, you create a localized mounding which changes the local groundwater flow direction. So it impacts us in different ways. mainly in groundwater flow direction and the transport of whatever's in the water, whether it's clean water or dirty water. We have to figure out where that water is going to move based on that mounding. But a lot of our stuff, as far as infrastructure wise, currently a lot of our water mains downtown are already underwater. It doesn't take much to dig on Easton Street and you're already in groundwater, a couple shovels and you're there. So for us, it's moving forward, modeling that. Our model goes back. We've looked all the way back, like over a 600-year time, projecting back with the model of what it looked like and what it looks like now. And we've incorporated the sea level rise to now. And going forward, I would probably rely on this committee and others to help us get the information and expected numbers that we can throw into the model to make those predictions of where the mounding is going to take place. I don't know. I don't readily have that information. I'm going to be looking for help when we get to that point. Hopefully with your help and others on the island, we can kind of figure out and work together what we think it's going to be 50, 60, out to 100 years from now. What's it going to look like? And that will have impacts on our future well locations, impacts on our withdrawal permit. Right now, our closest well to the coast is probably North Pasture, which is by the tank off Pulpus Road, by the Girl Scout camp, just past Don Allen Ford. Again, it's up on a hill. It's there, but it really affects the localized groundwater flow, and that could affect our water withdrawal permit, because we cannot impact any wetlands or any type of protected space that could be, that the map could change because of the increase in the wetland area. So it could eventually affect our water withdrawal permit. And to model that is a difficult thing, but we're working on trying to do that.
Okay. Are you finished?
Yep.
Thank you. We'll have questions, but I just want to thank you for a thorough, is way better than I expected to learn all that information. And yes, we'll absolutely keep you updated so you can keep your models up to date, and so that you can pivot and react as things progress.
The minute it's done, you guys will be like one of the first groups I'll contact, and maybe we can meet here at Wannacomet. We can look at the model on the big screen. And,
okay.
And once we learn how to do it and use it, we can actually have set up meeting times where we can all sit down together and put numbers in. So, say it, whatever, there's a 10-inch rise over 15, 20 years, whatever that time frame is, put that into the model, run the model, and it will show, or should show with some accuracy, what's going to happen to the wetlands and what kind of stormwater drainage we're going to have to design to take care of that, and how that impacts the aquifer itself.
And it's interesting now that the Conservation Commission they updated their regulations, and seems like this will have an impact on, if wetlands are going to be created in areas that they weren't created before because of rising groundwater and also rising sea level. The information you have will be good to go to them, so that maybe they're going to be able to make their changes sooner than they thought they would. So
right, and I know the stormwater. I know David Gray and the sewer department's taken over stormwater, and they're currently working on their regulations for a stormwater regulation set. So they'll actually be, this is what you have to do if you do a subdivision or a development. This is what you have to put in during construction to maintain the stormwater, not just washing out and silting up the roads and the catch basins. So there's going to be a set of regulations that will help guide where that stormwater is going to have to go. But with the model's help, we might be able to predict and then budget out, for capital expenditures, on like a 10-year capital plan, try to figure out where we're going to have to go and what kind of money that's going to take to do it.
Hey, Bob.
I think And that's good that you're thinking that way, since we've already met with all the chairmen and vice chairmen of the various regulatory boards to get from them how we can incorporate coastal resilience policies into their regulations. It's sort of a next step for us.
Right.
So Doug, do you have something?
Thank you, Peter. Mark, welcome to CRAC, and thank you for a fascinating overview. I think I can safely say everyone in Nantucket has same level of concern over the welfare of the aquifer, but I imagine the vast majority, myself included, also have very little clue as to how it works.
Right.
So to know that you're working on a 3D model is, to me, very exciting and interesting. And I for one, would love to take you up on your offer if CRAC could do a field trip and see some of the work that you have in progress. The question, I guess, I've got 1,000 questions going through my mind as you were talking, but foremost among them, I think, was sort of it was inspired by some of the conversations that Peter alluded to, where we've been meeting with the various chair people and vice chairs of the various regulatory committees, commissions, and boards. And one theme seemed to come out over and over again, which was that each of those committees and boards and commissions are working in sort of a vacuum. They're operating within their own relevant regulatory framework, right? And too often, it seems, one regulatory framework sort of runs at odds with another regulatory framework. One of the ones that Ray Pohl from the HDC talked about was how, or I guess it was Malcolm McNabb mentioned something about how the HDC had recently approved a project which actually would violate the Board of Health regulations, and through no fault of anyone's. I guess my question for you is, can you imagine the town getting to a point where we could bring together all these regulatory frameworks in a more coherent way, where your concerns would be balanced with the concerns of the ZBA and CONCOM and, the whole alphabet soup of regulatory commissions? I know this is a long question, but you know what I'm asking for? Is there a way to knit these all together somehow? I guess that's what I'm asking.
I think
Thanks.
there is, and I think we've been kind of moving in that direction a little bit better. The communication's getting a lot better between different groups and different departments. I have standing meetings now with David Gray and Sewer, which we never used to do. We get involved with conservation a lot. Jeff Carlson is a major player for me. When I do these models and when I drill and I try to collect geophysical data through different studies, I get Jeff involved, because a lot of the things he's looking at, I'm looking at. I've actually added parts of our model with Jeff and his recommendations to look at, like, the coastal zones of the aquifer. So if you go out to Monomoy at low tide, right there at the end of Monomoy where the dinghies are, the birds are drinking the water pouring out of the beach. Birds don't drink salt water, they drink fresh water. Our bowl and aquifer is full and it's coming out the edges. Our goal, my worry isn't the abundance that our aquifer has. It's when regulations take place that have to do with protection. I worry about PFAS. I worry about all chemicals. I worry about car washes. I worry about the salt we use on the roads the last 5 or 6 years. That never used to happen. There was a standing agreement with water and DPW that stuff just didn't go down. This last winter, everybody's car is completely covered in a salt material. That can impact our gravel packed wells, just same as PFAS. If I have too much chloride from the sodium products being put down, the de-icing agents, I got to close the well down. So it isn't just one chemical or another that scares me. They all scare me. And those regulations need to be talked and discussed and all together as one. And that's why, like, the sea level rise is very important. And I want to get you guys involved when the model's ready, is because all the localized stuff that we do, whether it is with something CONCOM's putting forward or the Board of Health with private wells and their regulations and all that, and the stormwater regs, it all affects me because I'm underneath all of it. The aquifer is on the bottom, right? I'm gonna receive whatever they do on top, I'm gonna catch. So I really want to make sure that we're involved and all parties have opinions expressed and ideas shared, because if we don't, something's gonna happen and something's gonna be missed, and it could be too late. And I don't want to ever get to the point where it's too late because we didn't have a conversation with some person or a board or a committee. And I know everybody's really busy and we have a lot of meetings, but maybe an idea of a quarterly meeting where a bunch of us can get together. You know, it doesn't have to be a long thing. Maybe it's once a quarter, the Water Commission meets with you guys and we have a shared meeting together to find out what you're doing, what we're doing. We could pull, Concom in and maybe we do it once or twice, 3 times, 4 times a year and see how it goes. It doesn't have to be monthly, doesn't have to be, maybe quarterly's too much, I don't know, but maybe we come up with an idea like that where we try it once or twice a year, a couple times a year, we get together as a group and just throw ideas out of what we're all working on and what new regulations they think are going to come forward that's going to impact all of us. And again, I receive everything that's done on top. So whether it's construction related, stormwater related, septic system regulations really affect me. All of it affects the groundwater. So we all have to get together, share ideas and what's happening if we're gonna protect it the best we can.
Thanks a lot, Mark. Go ahead, John.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, hey Mark, I don't know whether you remember me, but about 8 to 10 years ago, I sat in your office a couple of times and you explained everything aquifer and groundwater levels to me, and which was I still remember it all. I think the ideas that have been floated around shared meetings is great, Mark. But I guess I have a narrower question. I'm a new member of the planning board. Is it premature for you to sit down, at one of our planning board meetings and just orientate the board members on the things that you've just gone through here, just so that their people can start to put things into their brains about what this might mean and when it might mean something. And and if it's premature, Mark, that's fine. Just tell me it's premature. Or is that something that you think would be useful at this point?
I think anytime we can talk about what the aquifer is and how it operates, it's a good thing. We've had great communication with the planning board and the planning department. Every time there's a subdivision plan, I'm notified right away. I get the PDF CAD files. I get to look at the design and make comments. I just received an email the other day about upcoming projects that are going to go through you guys. And that's awesome because I get a chance to sit down with a couple of the guys here in the office and go over what it means for us extending water mains and supplying water and really looking at the stormwater stuff for the commercial projects, because that really impacts us. And but anytime to sit in front of a group and explain our aquifer and how important it is to protect it, I don't think that's ever premature.
Okay, great. Thanks so much.
Great. Thanks, John. And thanks, Mark. Leah, you have something to say?
Yeah, thanks, Mark, for coming today. Very, very interesting. And I'm happy to share the sea level rise scenarios with you. I just had a clarifying question. So with your 3D model, did you say that you can input different sea level rise scenarios and then that'll get worked up and you can figure out what the depth to groundwater is?
Yeah, so what we were doing when we first started doing all these geophysics to look at the aquifer, that's the reason I was hired 25 years ago. We came up and found some information that no one knew was, we totally changed the whole aquifer map. Everything about it changed our work. During that work, team of scientists that were helping us were really interested in the glacial period, how it built our aquifer. So they actually have a model right now that shows groundwater elevations during the last glaciation and how it's changed over 7 or 8, 9,000 years to where it is right now. Then we took that and we're throwing that in our newer model. It's going to be the current model to find out what's going to happen going forward. And we should be able to, at the end of this thing, literally plug in, pick a number, inches, feet, whatever you want to do of sea level rise, and run that model and show us how it changes the groundwater contour map of the island.
Wow, that's excellent.
Yeah, tremendously helpful.
I just signed a contract with the company doing it. They're very specialized. They just got bought up by GZA. It's Emery and Garrett out of New Hampshire. All they are hydrogeologists. All they do is study groundwater. That's all they do. They don't do anything else. And I'm excited for it. I hope it works. I know a model is only good as the data in equals the data out. That's why I know about sea level rise, but I'm not as advanced in some of what's going on as you guys. That's why I wanted to get you guys involved when we get the model ready. So we're putting in the right numbers that are realistic and that are going to give us the information we need.
All right, thanks, Mark. Are there any other committee members that have comments or questions? Okay, we'll take public comments and questions. No more than 3 minutes. First on top is Bruce Mandel. Go ahead, Bruce.
Very much. Very quickly, we're concerned about groundwater out in Mattocket. Couple of issues, Mark, if you might comment after I'm done speaking. One is the unlined cell at the landfill. Town's in violation of mining it, and it's full of PFAS containing materials, and every time it rains, the water soaks through it into the perched aquifer here in Mattocket. And I'd like to, find out how we can focus on perhaps getting that mined. The other issue is the DPW is trying to move its office compound because of fears of eventual sea rise. And they're looking for funds to do that. But there are no plans to help if the sea level rises enough to cause the DPW compound to need to be relocated. How are we going to access Mattocket? How are we going to access the landfill? Tech Engineering suggested we raise the roadbed of the Massasoit Bridge by 1.5 feet. And the same with the Ames Avenue Bridge and the Mattocket Road portion around the landfill and the culverts. But the main concern here is groundwater and that the unlined landfill cell. Do you have any thoughts on that you could share with us?
Well, I know it's a concern for all of us here at Wanacom, especially me. Anything with the landfill, anything at the wastewater plant, places where we're bringing what we don't want and disposing of, leads to there's going to be contamination from all that stuff. That's why I really want to get this model done so we could actually look at that area in Mattocket and see if it's going to change the local direction. If the sea level rises, is it still going to flow towards Long Pond, or are we going to change the direction of that flow locally before it moves back to Long Pond? I think there's going to be some more information coming out about the landfill. I know there's a few committees, and I know Drew and those guys have been at the DPW have been looking at that. And obviously, if we've got to move the DPW because it gets that high, something's going to have to be done with the landfill and the road. Sure, we could raise the road and the infrastructure that goes with that. But if it continues to rise, I mean, I don't know. Do you just keep adding feet to the bridge and the culverts? It's a it's a hard question to answer. I mean, it could have a huge impact on everything.
Well, thank you for that answer. I guess eventually Mattocket will become an island, huh?
I hope not, but I mean, we don't know with the ditches and the creeks, and you live out there. It's a lot. There's a lot of exposed groundwater already. A lot of wetlands. So sea level rise, that's one of the places there. The Holbert Avenue, Brant Point area, North Beach Street, a lot of areas in Mattocket. Anywhere around any ponds, ponds will rise, their sea level will rise. So the whole Maya Comet area with sea level rise, those ponds are going to rise. It's going to have a big impact on a lot of areas on the island, not just Mattocket.
Oh, thank you for your comments. And Peter, if the committee could focus a little bit on the West End, we'd appreciate it too.
Okay, Bruce, thanks for your comments. Is there any other public comment? Okay, thank you very much, Mark. Thanks everybody who asked questions. We're not done talking about this. We definitely want to come over to you and see that model when you get it ready, Mark.
Without a doubt, you guys will be one of my first calls.
And I like the idea of quarterly meetings too. So we'll work something out with that.
Yeah, I'd be up for that. Even just the first one, just to see if it's worth it and how we do it, and just to everybody get on the same page.
Awesome. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So number 8, presentation and discussion on new tools for visualizing, communicating, and assessing sea level rise and coastal flood risk by Climate Control's Allison Kopicki, coordinator for outreach and communications, Flood Vision at Climate Control, and Kelly Van Balen, project manager for sea level rise team at Climate Central. Okay, go ahead, you guys.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for having us. I'm going to share my screen if that's okay, because the visualizations that we've created are very visual. So let me just make sure everybody can see this. And I'll do the slideshow. And then hopefully I can also see my notes. Hold on, I'm going to see if I can just stop share for a second. Sorry, I want to get my notes visible. Let's see. We can just keep going. Share screen.
Allison, do you want me to share my screen and then you can have your notes on your
Great.
computer?
Yeah,
I
thank you.
could do that as well, Allison, if you'd like.
Oh, yeah, Kelly can do it. If Kelly can do
Okay.
it, then I can actually see my notes. So the problem, I have two
Cool.
screens, but the one blows up.
Here we go.
Thanks, Kelly.
No
So
problem.
I'm Allison Kopicki. I'm the coordinator for outreach and communications around Flood Vision and our Edge of America tour, which we'll talk about in a second. And Kelly Van Balen is the program manager on our Sea Level Rise program. And so what we're talking about today are these new visualizations that we've created to show the risk of sea level rise and coastal flooding. So if you can imagine hurricane heading towards possibly, say, the Texas coast, and they're warning that the flood is about to, that there's high risk of significant flooding. Go ahead. And there's a school in the way of this hurricane. And what we can show with our science-based visuals is what that flooding might look like for the school. Go ahead. And so what we're talking with lots of officials in all these states is what they're worried about are critical facilities or streets. We can show the next one. Here's a street with 5 feet above 5 feet of water above the roadway, and the next one. And and we can show different levels of that flooding based on what the storm is predicted to be. So this is in Texas, and this is a This is an evacuation route that they're worried about. Okay. So Climate Central, just so you know what we're basically making these so that we can work with communities like yours and commissions like your commission to inform the public of the risk that they're going to be facing. What we've found is that, to do storytelling about climate impacts and to raise awareness in your local community, sometimes better to do it with visuals than just with maps. Climate Central is a nonprofit organization. We're dedicated to creating tools and communications about climate change to accelerate responses and to climate change at all levels. We're a very eclectic crew. Just so everybody knows, we are a group of climate and computational scientists, software programmers and engineers, meteorologists, policy wonks, former journalist, Peter. We have a sea level rise program that has a team dedicated to this flood vision tool, but we also have a number of popular mapping programs, including the Coastal Risk Screening Tool and Risk Finder, which allows users to get summaries of populations and infrastructure at risk. And Kelly's a pro at these, and if you have questions for her about our other mapping tools afterwards, please ask. So, and I just wanted to show you what our Climate Matters program, Kelly, if you can go to the next one. Yeah. About 15 years ago, the smarter folks that created our organization and folks at Yale Climate Communications found out that the scientists that Americans trust the most are their local weathercaster. And so we've been working with meteorologists across the country for the last 15 years and giving them a weekly data and graphics so that they can talk about climate impacts at the very local level. And while this is a flood presentation, I do know that all of those working in resilience and climate adaptation have to deal with multiple hazards. So when we presented a few weeks ago, we were in Utah, it was at the same time that emergency managers in New Mexico had to shift from fighting fires to performing flood rescues. So you can always sign up for our Climate Matters program. It's free, and our graphics are very useful if you're trying to communicate heat events or any other extreme weather events. And the next one, I'll show you one of our other newest and greatest tools that folks might want to look at. This is the Climate Shift Index, and it reveals how much climate change influences the temperature on a particular day. So if you look at this one, this is June 25th, 2024. So this is when earlier this year, you were seeing one of those big heat waves that was impacting the West and the Southeast. And you can see in those dark red areas that what it means is that climate change made the conditions at least 5 times more likely. So that this is, the human-induced climate change is having an effect on our daily temperatures. And next, yeah. So this is also, we've been doing work on how much the climate change has been affecting the flooding days and human days. So human caused flood days. These are, the orange is all the human cause compared to what the blue, which would have been natural. And we've studied the impact of human caused sea level rise on the economic damage from storms like Sandy as well. And then finally, we have a local journalism program. We work with local meteorologists across the country. We also partner with local journalists. We know the New York Times and the Washington Post and the Boston Globe have resources to do major reporting, but we know that a lot of the local journalists are actually the ones that local Americans also trust the most. And so we're working with them with data and graphics and reporting to help them talk about climate impacts as well as solutions. And finally, I'll get back to flood vision. So this is our flood rover. This is the second vehicle that we've developed. This is a Ford 150 Lightning, and it's outfitted with a rig on top. It has 2 stereoscopic cameras on each side. We connect this with LiDAR and GPS positioning so that we can get very, very, very precise visualizations as we drive. So if you think about it as Google Street View, but for coastal flooding. And so as we drive the flood rover along, we can take snapshots of all of the structures and anything along the way. And we're using AI also to train it to identify first floor elevations. And so we are on the Edge of America tour. We started at the Blue Hill, Maine, at their wastewater treatment plant. I hear, as obviously wastewater treatment is a problem in many areas, many coastal areas. Their wastewater treatment plant is only 12 inches above the high tide line. And Blue Hill has a hospital and pharmacies and a number of businesses that serve many communities on that peninsula. So that we sat down with a group of locals and talked about and collected their stories on the impacts that they're seeing and that they've been seeing over the years. We are going to be going all the way to Texas. We are currently in New York and out on Long Island today, looking to document the flood risk. Here's what our interface looks like. This is the inside. This is where we were on Nantucket a few weeks ago. On the left side, you can see that we can select different scenarios to visualize, whether we just select feet above the road level to show, you could say, if you know what a 2-foot flood wants to look like, or you can do it above the average high tide line. We can also put in sea level rise projections from NOAA and the IPCC, and we can do that at different decades and add on different floods. And I will show you what those look like when you're in Nantucket. Okay. Oh, yeah. And this was our great host. So we do really say a big thank you to Nantucket for welcoming us and showing us where some of the places we should collect the data. So this is
Arnold or 2 others.
Oh, sorry. So I'm sure this is probably a location that you are familiar with. And sorry, going back one. So this is the NOAA 2022 model, intermediate high sea level rise scenario for 2050 with the 1% annual chance flood, or that's the 100-year flood. The metadata shows that the water height is 5 feet, 3 inches above the average local high tide line. So what these visualizations can show local people is this is what it's going to look like during a flood without having to go out there and put your lives at risk. So that's, we know people are worried about that. So the next one, again, this is, whoops. Again, this is another NOAA 2022 model for the year 2050. So this is the same scenario. Again, the same scenario. Similar. Again, 2050. And here's, so Massachusetts has its own dynamic sea level rise models, as I'm sure you know. So what I did was I used their sea level rise scenarios going forward for these next few slides, and you can see. So this next one, so this just shows you about 1.2 feet above the road but it's at the 5 feet level above the local high tide line. And this next one is 10 feet above local high tide line, which is what the Massachusetts model predicts is the height for 2050 with a 1% storm on Easy Street, just so you know. And then finally, you can see this is, again, that similar 5 feet above Easy Street, above the average high tide line. And again, another 5 feet above the average high tide line. And I think this is an intersection of Francis and Washington Street. And again, different models, so you can show people what it would look like during an event. So anyway, we would love to get some of your feedback. I know this is a public meeting, so if anybody has questions or reactions to these visualizations, what our intent is as we are trying to work with communities to see how folks would use this. What we are hearing from a lot of local planners or town engineers is that they have, they're trying to encourage folks to buy flood insurance in some places. Others want to do buyouts. And they see these visualizations as a way to, encourage and to educate their local communities about the flooding. And we wanted to know what you think and what you think others' reactions would be and how you might use these, and what we can do to improve them.
Okay. And I can assume that the visualizations that you showed us, those are completely without any of the recommendations in the CRP being implemented. So it's
Right.
worst case scenario. We as a community decided to do absolutely nothing, and
Yeah.
this is what could potentially happen to us if we don't do anything.
Yes.
So for me, it looks like a good way to, shock and awe, like, oh my God, this is what it could be based on the current data. And you're going to have people who are going to go, that's crazy. That's never going to happen. Oh my God. I'm not worried. Look at it now. It's no big deal. And just write us off.
Yeah.
But the more credibility that you guys can put behind this, the better chance you're going to have convincing people. Some people are just not going to accept it, but those are my initial thoughts. So are there any committee members that have thoughts that want to share with us? Nobody? Okay, John, go ahead. You're muted, John. You're muted, John.
Sorry, Peter. So, Alison, just remember that I'm a very new member of this board. So I'll probably have different views in 6 months' time. But I do think what Peter just said, my version of that would be, I think we have a trust issue on the island of whether or not this is real or not, or really likely to happen. And it it's a bit of an island-wide problem where there is for some areas of what's going to be very critical to us, there is a lack of trust in even the data. So I don't know what the answer to that is. This seems like one answer to use this. Perhaps if there are some versions of this that are not, 25 years out and not a once in a 100-year storm, perhaps if there was some visualizations of things not that dramatic, but perhaps more likely to happen. Mm-hmm. It's just, I'm struggling with how to tell you, what could we do to build trust? Peter is probably way more capable of answering that. But as a new person on the board, and it's not a reflection on people or the board, but the lack of trust around this subject, I think is difficult when it comes to, educating and getting money and so forth.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just jump in?
Yeah.
Leah, what was the name of that movie we watched? Inundation District, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So, John, I would, hopefully Leah can put you onto this, but Inundation District is a documentary on the redevelopment of a section of Boston's waterfront,
right,
which more or less ignored, all the climate change warnings. And now it's experiencing sea level rise at, sunny day flooding and the potential for what's going to happen. And I mean, it's already happening there. So if you're trying to build trust, you should have people watch that, because that's a very good example of what could be coming our way if we don't do anything.
I think one of the suggestions that I've been, working with journalists is to basically just, we can show the visualization at the most recent high flood, right? And the Northeast got hit hard in January and recent in, multiple years. Those are, so putting the water above the average high tide line, around 4 feet is what's, would be the recent flooding that hit a lot of the Northeast. And so those are a little bit lower, but they still show an impact. So that's great.
And before I let Joanna say something, I just want to say that, because we're a government entity, telling people this is coming and this is going to happen, there's already a level of distrust in government, local, state, federal, on up. So we've got that hurdle to clear, and I don't know how you can get people to read, but if all you have to do is read the articles in the trusted organizations, news media that talk about what we're talking about, all the information is out there. It's one way. There's a thing that I subscribe to called dailyclimate.org, which is it basically gathers all the climate news of the day and sends it to you in your inbox, and then you can read about it, so that it's not us, the government, saying, "Oh, watch out, it's gonna flood and we're in trouble," and then everyone saying, "Oh yeah, we've heard that before." And then I'll just say the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee isn't going away. We're still going to be here. We're still going to be hammering this home. Hopefully people hear us. We're in public outreach mode now. So anyway.
Yeah, Peter, just a follow-up comment, because like I was trying to say, this isn't about lack of trust in a particular organization, or I wasn't trying to suggest that at all. What I was wondering about is, there is a value to getting a few really trusted individuals on our island to speak out for us. I'll give you some examples. Nathaniel Philbrick would be one. Dr. Lepre would be one. A guy like Harvey Young would be one. And, if we could get some obviously well-respected, 100% trusted people to speak out and deliver some of our messages, that might be a building block then to get people to go and read about stuff and watch movies and so forth. But that's just a suggestion that we might want to think about, is getting some trusted island individuals. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, John. You want to go ahead, Joanna?
Hi, thank you, Peter. I thought that the photo illustrations were very interesting. I think and I appreciate what John has said. I think that, part of what we need to do as our job here is to tell this story in a way that isn't frightening, but is compelling. And I think that these photos can help, but I don't think that they can be the only part of the message. And so I would like to, understand how these have rolled out in other communities, maybe, and sort of what additional stakeholders were involved. I guess I think I want more context.
Sure. Some of the government officials that we've been talking to, these are very strong for, everybody's excited about them for getting funding, basically for mitigation projects and adaptation projects, for especially like in FEMA brick grants and things like that. So that's become, that's one thing that we hope people will use these for. And again, we've done a little bit, a sample all the way down the coast. These are free for your organizations to use. We're not focusing on private residences. We're not going to put those out. We believe that trusted government organization, local government organizations can do that. We'll look at iconic places and critical facilities and public places to do the messaging. Also, I agree with you. What we've learned is that leading these stories, these climate stories, with solutions and hope, and what are the things that people can do to make sure that this scenario isn't what actually is the future. We're hoping to say that if you can see the future, you can change the future. And that's what these visualizations, and they're science-based. So, and there are people who don't actually trust the science. So we do get that. The other thing that people have had us focus on is to use places that are memorable and part of their kind of their places that they want to save, right? So for future generations and that type of thing. And that's supposed to be very strong in messaging, is more people are prone to do something and take action if it's to save something for the next generation. So we have heard that from some of the messaging experts. I agree with you. So besides grants, other parts of the United States and in many communities, there has not been a huge uptake of flood insurance. That's another thing that we're working on. Homes cannot be part of the FEMA buyout program unless they are part of the National Flood Insurance Program. So that might not be something in your community, but it is important in other communities, and this is a piece of that.
Thanks, Allison. Leah, go ahead.
Thanks, Peter. Thank you, Allison, for presenting today. When we spoke a couple of weeks ago, I was telling you that the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee is embarking on public outreach, and I was just curious. I know that you used to be a journalist, and how do we try to contact, or we have tried to contact the media to highlight what the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee is doing, all about the town's coastal resilience plan and the different projects that are being implemented. But curious if you have any suggestions of how to improve that conversation.
Well, first, I would, any names of journalists you want us to nudge a little bit, I can get our partnership journalism program to, put a little package together and send it over. So sometimes if it comes from, a source, a science-based, we're not local, but we work with locals. And it might be helpful. Usually journalists use our resources during an event. So when a heat event happens, people pick up our resources and they remember. So it's okay for us to keep kind of getting into their inbox on a weekly basis or whatever. And when an event happens, then they remember us and they say, oh, we need your visuals or we need your graphics. And that's true. I think that's going to be very true if this is as active a flood or hurricane season as we predict. We were already contacted by folks in Texas. We had done a little bit of testing in Texas with the flood river last year, and the Weather Channel and a couple other journalists reached out to us for what would it look like for when Beryl came through. So I think that's it's the phrase, don't let a disaster. A disaster is a terrible thing. It's also a major opportunity to teach people. So you just have to remember, for any of these flood events, don't let up on the gas on your outreach and your I would really, that's when you have to push a little bit.
Thank you, Allison. Go ahead, Gary.
Thank you, Peter. Allison, these are very, very interesting, and I think the pictures, the visualizations are extremely powerful. But my thought process is that if you go to, and what you showed us is 2050, and it seems to be far enough out so that people won't perhaps worry about it too much, especially people in my age in the 80s aren't too worried about 2050 right now. But so my question is two questions. First, are we able to take a look at 2030,
Yes.
2035, and 2040? That's the first question. And the second question is there an opportunity for people? I happen to live downtown in Grand Point in a flood zone on Willard Street. And the question is, if I wanted to see what my street would look like in 2030 or 2035, am I able to do that? Is there enough in the system that will allow me to actually take a look at what's going to happen here in 6 years or 8 years or 9 years?
Sure.
Those are my questions.
Those are great questions. We can do by decade, so 2030, 2040, 2050. 2050 is a reason we picked that one a lot is the further, the science is a little bit better at predicting a little bit further out in one sense, but it is also the life of a mortgage. So if someone is buying a property now, a 30-year mortgage, 2050 happens during that time. So that's one of the reasons that, we pick that time, but we can do 2030. There won't be as dramatic showing of water. I think the 2030 is important if you show what would happen in 2030, and then you do two things. You show 2030, and then you add what would happen in a big storm. I know everybody hears a 100-year storm, and it's not supposed to happen for another 100 years, but they've been recurring almost back to back, right? And they, a lot of the research is showing that these quote 100-year storms are going to be happening almost on an annual basis within the next 30 years. So I think that's a good combination. Secondly, yes. So if we have passed by your property, we would have that data in the system. What we're trying to do here at Climate Central is to fundraise enough so that we can house all this data and visualizations with a trusted source. So I can, easily go for anybody here who wants to get some locations and see if I can, if it's to show a streetscape or something, and I can work with Leah to get a package of visualizations that would work for this committee and show different scenarios, and then, it's put into your trusted hands so you can work with your community on that. What we'd really like to do is house it at a place like NOAA's Sea Grant organizations, which have a presence in every single state. They love that idea. That way it can be accessible to a community like yours, and they can work with you on how to get the information out there. We do worry about privacy. Obviously, we don't want to devalue anybody's homes at this point. We do want to, though, show the realistic potential of the future, because the home will be devalued if we don't do something about this now. So those are good questions, and I can follow up with Leah, and we can, if everybody gives her a number of locations, I can look at where we got to on the island and put together a package in the next few weeks so that you will have this. And again, if a storm is approaching, I can also get out those visualizations for anybody who, if there's a storm surge predicted, we can look at what that would look like.
That's great.
Thank you, Allison. Thanks, Gary. Are there any other CRAC members that have questions? Okay. Are there any members of the public that have questions? Okay. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Allison.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can definitely see us coming back to you with various places on the island for you to check out if that's possible.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And Kelly, we can stop sharing now. I think that's great. Thanks for being my co-pilot, Kelly.
Okay.
No problem.
Item number 9, update and discussion on the flood risk assessment and alternatives evaluation for the feasibility study and design for flood mitigation on Easy Street by Arcadis staff members, Bill Casey, project manager and engineer, Julie Conroy, senior resilience specialist, and Trevor Johnson, senior resilience planner. Okay, go ahead, guys.
Thank you so much for having us. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So we, in the interest of time, we're just going to go through this kind of at a quick high level. I think it's important, the discussion that was just brought up, Allison hopefully will stay on this call because I think one of the things that we want to focus on is the importance of the use of Commonwealth supported data and modeling. And in terms of visualizations, we have plenty here that are based on existing storm conditions. We'll show you. Next slide. We'll just go over the project. I'll give you a very quick sort of overview of where we are at today, but we'll want to focus on some key important pieces of information. In particular, we want to describe the flood risk analysis using the Commonwealth endorsed Mass Coastal Flood Risk Model, and our partners at Woods Hole Group have developed. And then, of course, give you a sense of the alternative flood mitigation solutions that have been based on this localized data. Next slide. And it's important for us to just pause here and note that this is, this project, the Easy Street project, is a critical part of the flood mitigation options for downtown Nantucket that were prioritized in the Coastal Resilience Plan. So to give a sort of frame of mind as to where this all comes from. Next slide. And we're about 7 months into this 18-month project. And so this is our schedule. We've completed the existing conditions, which gave us a baseline of understanding of all kinds of things, environmental, cultural, historic resources, as well as area hydrology, as noted previously, development patterns and infrastructure, and current and future flood conditions. So where we are today, we're in July. We've completed a bit of work, but now we're sort of moving into the phase of really digging into the alternative solutions that Trevor will describe in a bit. Next slide. And so, this is very familiar to you all. The project area is sort of based around Easy Street, the town-owned right-of-ways, the adjacent shoreline in the harbor basin itself. It includes Steamboat Wharf and Broad Street because, as Trevor will show, there are some particular flood pathways of concern that these alternatives will aimed to address. And the predicted flood analysis shows that flooding spills into the surrounding area. And so we also have included Oak Street, Chestnut Street, South Water Street, and portions of Still Dock in the project area. Next slide. So as I had mentioned in our initial slide, in terms of visualizations, there are precedents here where there is actual flood conditions that we can show at the end of storm. This was from a recent nor'easter in 2024 along Easy Street. This is a view towards Broad Street at the left side. The right-hand side is the same storm at the corner of Oak and Easy Street. So I think it's just important for us to sort of acknowledge the fact that we have precedents and we have existing conditions that people should see. Next slide. This is a photo of a March storm 2020, end of storm again, meaning, after things have calmed down a bit in terms of the storm conditions. This is a similar type of storm. It's the view along Easy Street towards Old North Wharf, showing flooding that has, breached, come over the Easy Street current flood barrier onto the surrounding area. Next slide. So the goal of this project, as the other downtown flood mitigation projects particularly, is to design flood protection for this area during current and future events. It's a very important and very lofty goal. However, there are strategies that we are we will be showing you, and we want to get it to a project outcome of a design, something that, you know, the town and stakeholders can truly consider for a real project. Next slide. And this is just showing that, you know, as I mentioned, we're in the stage now of moving engagement from sort of internal to the public. Just shown here, we've met with you folks before, and we are continued to meet with town departments and CZM. I was remiss to not say that CZM, Mass CZM, is the funding source for this project, as well as in-kind match from the town of Nantucket. So CZM representatives have been very helpful in guiding us through this work. We've also recently met with the land bank with respect to, you know, all alternatives for this area and whether they may have any implications for the Easy Street Park. We're going to be holding an open house on August 7th. There will be 2 sessions, one at, I believe, 8, Leah, correct me if I'm wrong, of these times, 8 to 10 a.m. And then that same day, 6 to 8. Tell me if that's...
So the morning is going to be 8 to 9:30 a.m.
9:30.
And then
yeah.
the night will be 5:30 to 7 p.m.
Excellent, thank you. So hopefully folks can make it. This will be a joint information session that we will hold with partners on the Washington Street project for flood mitigation that's led by SCAPE. And also there will be some information with respect to how these projects tie into the greater coastal resilience planning effort. Next slide. And so this is what we've heard so far from stakeholders. They've expressed these concerns. This is guiding the development of our alternatives. But I'd like to note that I think it was important to what we heard earlier from Mark regarding groundwater infiltration concerns, aquifer concerns, and the need to model these conditions using future sea level rise predictions, because that is a factor, and we have touched that slightly thus far with looking at stormwater and overland flow. But I'll just pause for just one moment and see, you know, if there's anything, unless Leah, maybe we should do this at the end, but, you know, we certainly want to make sure that we've heard all concerns about, you know, flood mitigation here for this area. We can get back to this if in terms of timing need be. So I'll just move on to, we took a deeper dive into existing conditions here. You know, we wanted to understand the makeup of existing infrastructure, the immediate shoreline, coastal conditions, coastal processes that occur within the basin, and of course, current and future flood risk, which is again done by the Woods Hole Group, our partners here, and associated flooding with respect to precipitation and tidal inundation to the storm drain system. So we really did take a deep look into that and how it affects infrastructure. And next slide. So I'm going to stop here and turn this over to Trevor. He'll go through the flood risk assessment and alternatives.
Thank you, Julie. So yes, based on the existing conditions analysis that Julie just walked through, Arcadis, with support from Woods Hole Group, conducted a flood risk assessment. The real purpose of this flood risk assessment is to provide us with data that will tell us what would happen under a no action scenario. So in a scenario where no investment is made to mitigate the current and long-term flood risk in the Easy Street project area, what would the risk to the town be? And when we say the town, we mean both private residences and businesses, as well as public infrastructure such as Easy Street itself, parks and recreational spaces like the Easy Street Park, and then as a cascading impact, the impacts of the access to Steamboat Wharf. We did utilize the Massachusetts Coast Flood Risk Model for this analysis. Julie touched on this a bit, but that's been adopted as the kind of best available coastal flood hazard data for coastal Massachusetts. It is utilized as part of the regulatory process that projects like these may need to go through. And so using this data sets us up to be able to assess most expeditiously. It won't be a surprise to anyone here to learn that our analysis showed that there is a significant risk to the Easy Street project area, both from high tide flooding today and in the future, as well as coastal storms both today and the future. That risk is posed to both the structures and activities that happen in this area, as well as perhaps the most significant consequence being the impacts to access and egress from Steamboat Wharf along Easy Street and Broad Street. Numerous structures, we assessed that flooding from this area could impact as many as 85 structures in this area through 2070. And all of the cumulative impacts here, which I would say are understating the cumulative risk because it doesn't account for all potential impacts. But the impacts that we were able to assess total $1.2 billion worth of risk from today through 2070. That accounts for physical damage to buildings and the contents of those buildings, economic disruptions to businesses and lost wages, as well as social disruption, which includes impacts to life safety, the mental health impacts of flooding, and other social considerations. I will say, as we get into the alternatives that we're looking at are not going to be able to mitigate all of this risk. So we're talking about improvements to the infrastructure along Easy Street. Those improvements also need to be complemented by other measures to kind of fully or more substantially reduce this risk. And we'll talk a little bit more about why. It's not just coastal flood risk that impacts this area. There's also a significant concern related to the stormwater drainage system. The stormwater drainage in this area is complicated, partially because of some unknowns or data gaps related to the existing infrastructure. The town is on that at the moment. They're in the process of mapping the existing infrastructure. That would be the first step to sort of wrapping our heads around, what is the long-term risk of stormwater flooding in this area, and how can it best be mitigated through different kinds of infrastructure improvements meant to manage the stormwater. And the stormwater is flowing from a larger drainage area that extends upland into the downtown area. Sort of related to that, there's also significant concerns about water quality. So as part of our assessment, we'll be looking at not just how to manage stormwater from a flood risk perspective, but also to ensure that any stormwater that's being discharged into the harbor is treated in compliance with state rules and regulations to help ensure and reduce impacts to water quality in Nantucket Harbor. This is just a map showing the projected extent of overland tidal flooding. So the darkest blue shade here shows projected daily high tide, mean high water in the 2030s under the high sea level rise projection adopted by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. The slightly later shaded blue shows the same tidal benchmark, so mean high water in the 2050s. And then the lightest shade of blue here shows the extent of tidal flooding in the 2070s. So as you can see, by the 2070s, we have really widespread impacts. So what I want to point out here is just that the work we do in Easy Street, in the Easy Street area, will have near-term benefits to mitigate flood risk in this area. But ultimately would need to be extended beyond just this project area as part of the overall strategy recommended by the CRP to provide comprehensive flood risk mitigation. Now, this map shows not tidal flooding, but flooding that may be expected from major coastal storms. So this is showing the projected extent of the 1% annual chance storm today through 2070. 1% annual chance storm is a storm that has a 1% chance storm of happening in any given year. Also sort of commonly referred to colloquially as the 100-year storm. That, as noted in the previous presentation, that doesn't mean it happens once every 100 years. It just means that the probability is 1% every year. The probability of this same event, as we'll talk about in a moment, will increase over over time with sea level rise. So design considerations, there's quite a bit of words on this slide. I won't read them all, but what I will say is that we've begun our alternatives development process with a lot of information that we've gleaned from the CRP process, from other ongoing efforts that have happened, as well as early conversations with stakeholders such as the CRAC. So we've kind of designed our alternatives with a lot of information already in mind that helps us create alternatives that have the greatest impact and the greatest, I think, alignment with stakeholder considerations. In terms of design flood elevation, and I'll just define that term for a moment, the design flood elevation is the level of protection that's afforded by the infrastructure. So one of the challenges that the Easy Street area currently suffers from is that the bulkheads in this area, one, were not designed to provide flood mitigation benefits, primarily therefore either life safety, keeping people from falling over the edge, as well as stabilizing the shoreline. In the world of flood mitigation, we would design different structures that may look and feel somewhat similar to what's there today, but they'd be engineered for the specific purpose of mitigating flood risk. They would also be designed to the same top of wall elevation, and so that consistent top of wall elevation ensures that we have comprehensive protection and don't have flanking of floodwaters to whatever elevation we're talking about over time. So I see somebody has a hand raised. Peter, would you like to take questions as we move through, or just reserve until we move through the presentation?
Probably reserve to the end.
Okay, sounds good. So we're looking at a couple of different design flood elevations, and we'll walk through these in a moment. 6.5 feet NAVD 88 is one of them. For reference, the current bulkhead that is along Easy Street, directly along the waterfront and owned by the town, has a top of wall elevation of 6.5 feet NAVD 88. So if you want a visual reference, a physical reference of what that elevation feels like along Easy Street, that is what that elevation would feel like. We've also looked at a series of alternatives that look at a higher level of protection that would provide more benefits in terms of risk mitigation, but has the consequence of being a larger structure in the downtown area. So that's a trade-off that we can continue to think about and talk about as we move through this process. Other considerations, as we developed our alternatives, we heard loud and clear the need to maintain vehicular and pedestrian access along Easy Street, ideally not just maintain it, but improve it. We must maintain access and egress to Steamboat Wharf. And then ultimately, we're looking to not just maintain, but also improve and enhance the experience of being along Easy Street and accessing Steamboat Wharf, either as a pedestrian or in a vehicle. In terms of feasibility, some of our considerations, we're looking to maintain the existing bulkhead line. And what I mean by that is looking to avoid going outboard of the existing bulkhead line. The reason for that is that going outboard could have in-water impacts that reduces permittability or permitting feasibility, but also has ecological impacts. So we'd like to minimize those to the greatest extent possible. The project must tie in to high ground to provide protection, through a certain horizon within this compartment. Property acquisition is something that we're thinking about. We want to have alternatives that both consider the need for property acquisition, as well as those that do not rely on property acquisition. And then we've already mentioned stormwater runoff and stormwater management, and the need to consider that as part of the solution. Some of the unknowns that we're still kind of working with as part of our evaluation is the 31 Easy Street parcel. This is the parcel at the corner of Easy Street and Broad Street on the east side. This is a parcel that we don't know the future of in terms of acquisition. As you'll see, it would be certainly useful to the project if we were able to acquire that parcel as part of the project. And then Steamship Authority, they are undertaking a separate process to mitigate flood risk to Steamboat Wharf. Our understanding is that project is going to be launched this year. we will need to maintain close coordination and collaboration with that project as we move forward, because ideally the project for Easy Street is very well integrated and coordinated with what happens on Steamboat Wharf. Just in terms of levels of protection, I'll walk through this just to orient people. On the first column that says target DFE, those are elevations referencing NAV D88, which is a datum. So that's not above grade, that's above a datum point. We have the elevations 4.5 to 8.0. And then across the top row, you'll see the level of protection in terms of storm protection or tidal flood protection over time. And so we have present day, 2030, 2050, and 2070. What happens if we look at, for example, the 8.0 feet NAV D88 design flood elevation in the final row? If we were to implement that today, we would be protecting against today's 1% annual chance storm or 100-year storm. But due to sea level rise, that level of protection, that level of effectiveness reduces over time as the same event, the same level of flooding happens more frequently. So by 2030, that 1% annual chance storm becomes the 5% annual chance storm or the 20-year storm. And then finally, by 2070, that storm is a 2-year storm or 50% annual chance. So really the long-term effect of our project is really focused on highly frequent storms that happen or tidal conditions that happen annually or have a high probability of happening annually. That's the long-term benefit. And then in the near term, we hope to protect against more significant storms or storms with a lower probability of happening. We've also, we've assessed our alternatives across a range of criteria. These criteria are related to a number of different feasibility as well as co-benefit types of assessments. So level of protection, ease of implementation, permitting requirements, cost, adaptability, meaning can the project be adapted over time as our knowledge of climate change and other considerations changes, fundability, and then co-benefits. These are really at this point qualitative assessments and meant to inform stakeholder conversations. Nothing that we are presenting here is final or intended to provide a recommendation for which alternative is best. These are options that we look to improve and refine through conversations with stakeholders like yourselves. So now I'll walk through the 4 alternatives, and I'll do so fairly quickly so we have some time for conversation here. There's 4 alternatives. This is alternative 1. This is the only alternative that is designed to the 6.5 feet DFE. And I would consider this option kind of our base option. This is the option that among those considered kind of provides the least amount of disruption, though I will say a project of this magnitude, is substantial, so I don't want to minimize that. But as you'll see, the other alternatives provide a much higher kind of magnitude. The real kind of outline of this strategy is that we have a flood wall that's located along Broad Street that extends to high ground elevation there in the median between Broad Street and what Steamship Authority at least refers to as Truck Alley to the north of Broad Street. As the line of protection that's kind of shown in the yellow here extends south, it crosses Steamboat Wharf to avoid the need for a gate structure at the entrance to Steamboat Wharf, regrading of the wharf entry, so that you have kind of an up and over that would be accessible by trucks and vehicles, but provides passive protection to the 6.5 foot elevation. It then extends southward along the existing bulkhead line. All of these alternatives do protect Easy Street Park by locating the infrastructure at the existing bulkhead line. The notion there is that Easy Street Park is a significant community asset and provides a lot of benefit to the downtown area, and so protecting that from flooding is a good thing to do. And then as the line of protection extends south, it then crosses Easy Street through another up and over regrading of the roadway. Again, at a grade that is accessible by trucks and vehicles, provides passive protection, and then ties in back to high ground along Old North Wharf. As I said, I'll move through these quickly to paint kind of a high-level portrait of the differences between them, and then we can go back and discuss anything. And I should have mentioned there's two sections that are located on the lower right of each of these. One section showing the Easy Street area, and then the other section showing the Broad Street area. So alternative 2, the major differences between alternative 2 and alternative 1 is that firstly, we've begun to look at strategies for the Broad Street area that would actually look to rearrange the right of way there. Our understanding is that the experience of driving vehicles and walking along Broad Street when a ferry is is quite chaotic. And so we see this project as an opportunity to potentially improve that experience by increasing the pedestrian walkway along Broad Street. Now that would require potentially a reduction in either Truck Alley and or Broad Street. And so there's different kinds of scenarios we can look at there, but the idea being that there's a co-benefit that can be realized by ideally improving that pedestrian experience as part of this project. The other major difference between this alternative and alternative 1 is the reliance on gates. So this is an alternative that does not include significant regrading of roadways. Instead, it provides protection through gate structures that would be open during dry conditions, but then would close before flooding events. Now, obviously, over time, as we just discussed, with increasing frequency of flooding, these gates may need to be closed very frequently. And so that's a significant disadvantage of this type of alternative. But by the same token, just a reduction in the need for regrading roadways. And now we move into the options that propose a more substantial reimagining of some of these areas. Here we see an even larger kind of pedestrian right-of-way expansion along Broad Street. At this scale, we may be able to look at some stormwater management benefits being integrated through green infrastructure along Broad Street. Again, larger pedestrian right-of-way. The trade-off there being, though, we have a reduction in available space for Truck Alley and truck parking there, as well as parking and traffic movement along Broad Street. The other major difference with this strategy from the previous two is it assumes acquisition of 31 Easy Street. 31 Easy Street being acquired provides a lot of potential benefits. One, you could provide additional pedestrian access from Steamboat Wharf to the Easy Street Park as people move to and from the ferry, as well as improved turning radius from Easy Street onto Steamboat Wharf, primarily for trucks, which have a hard time making that corner under current conditions. There's a lot of things that could also happen on the 31 Easy Street parcel, the potential for a pump station, if necessary, in that location, but that's just one option. There's lots of different options that could be considered here. And then just to note, the southern tie-in for this alternative is again an up and over along Easy Street. So Easy Street itself would be raised, and then a tie-in would happen to high ground on Old North Wharf and adjacent roadways. And then the final alternative, which hopefully, seems my screen may have frozen here, but can somebody go off mute and let me know if they're looking at the alternative 4?
Yes.
Great. Okay. So alternative 4, this is the most substantial alternative, requires the greatest kind of reimagining of this entire kind of area of downtown. You can think of this also as potential long-term evolution of some of the other alternatives. So let's not just think of these as mutually exclusive options, but as adaptable options over time. In this scenario, we're looking at what would happen if Steamboat Wharf were to be elevated itself to a higher elevation, in this case, 8 feet NAVT 88. That provides opens up a lot of opportunities for the project. One would be kind of a passive entrance to and from the wharf itself by ramping up, which negates the need for gates at the entryway, as well as sort of negating the need for kind of that up and over scenario we looked at into alternative 1. Again, similarly, there is an option here for kind of re-envisioning and expanding the pedestrian right-of-way along Broad Street. And then as we move south across the project area along the bulkhead line, existing bulkhead line, we would look at providing passive production, meaning no need for deployable or active structures such as gates, through elevation of the roadway network and regrading of that roadway network to reach our design flood elevation passively. And so you can see there the tiebacks along Dock Street all the way down to Straight Wharf as we elevate the roadway network there, keeping it dry and above flood elevations. These are just some sections. In the interest of time, I won't walk through these. If there are questions, we can certainly provide answers. Just kind of typical section showing the level of protection and what that impact would look like generally within the right-of-way to scale. And there's various different options that could be implemented in the various alternatives. Here's Broad Street. So just if you look at the difference between the median widths here in this example between alternative 1 and alternative 2, we're looking at a difference between the existing median is 10 feet, and alternative 1, we're able to buy an extra 2 feet while still maintaining three lanes on Truck Alley. If we start to reduce Truck Alley and reduce Broad Street, we get more room or gain the potential for more room along Broad Street, all the way out to alternative 3 and 4, which really show a significantly expanded pedestrian realm there, with the trade-off being as we've discussed. So as Julie mentioned, next steps, we're going to be meeting with direct property abutters in a virtual meeting next week. We look forward to continue to discuss these alternatives with that cohort. And then we're really ramping up to our open house, which is scheduled on August 7th. As noted, morning and evening sessions. This will be at the Nantucket Whaling Museum, just adjacent to our project area. We'll be presenting this same information and having conversations with residents and other stakeholders about these options, the trade-offs associated with them, and then ideally collecting input to inform kind of the next phase of design and refinement of these alternatives. So that concludes the presentation, but happy now to answer questions or take comments as we move forward.
Great, Trevor. Thorough as usual. Thank you so much. Go ahead, Doug.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you, Trevor. That was really interesting and great work. One quick question. You'd mentioned that your modeling had taken into consideration tidal flooding, coastal storm flooding. I am curious, is there any reason to be also considering groundwater as a potential threat in this area? Thanks.
Good. Peter, would you like me to answer that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, great question, Doug. And, I think Julie and Bill, and if Bill's still on the line, but Julie and others. Groundwater is a significant challenge, and this type of infrastructure that we're talking about here is really, intended to manage stormwater and overland flooding from sea level rise, coastal flooding, and tidal conditions. That's not to discount the need for planning around water level rise. It's more that it's a larger scale issue that really needs to be thought about at the kind of neighborhood scale and not within a particular area, just because the way groundwater moves, as we heard earlier, is very differently from the way it might move above ground. So I think there is going to need to be a conversation about that. It's the solutions to address groundwater rise in a location that's as low lying as Easy Street, are likely to look at things like actually raising grades substantially. And so that is some of the alternatives we're looking at that actually do raise the right of way, is starting to move in that direction of getting the infrastructure a little bit higher up so it's not as vulnerable to groundwater rise. But I think it's a little bit of a larger conversation than we're able to really tackle holistically in this particular compartment.
Thanks, Trevor. Are there other questions from the committee? Rachel, go ahead.
Thank you. There's something, and this is really simplistic, but there's something that I still don't totally understand, and I wonder how you're thinking this through. So when you raise grades for roads, I can see what we do with the public infrastructure, but what I don't really completely understand is how it impacts the private infrastructure on the backside, like those houses that, you know, immediately line Easy Street, and what considerations been giving to that. I'm sure there's some, I just don't really understand how it works. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the reason that we need to speak to abutters is because there's definitely a need for that conversation between what happens with the public infrastructure and private infrastructure. I mean, the most obvious thing that generally needs to happen as part of a project, and this would happen in a later phase of design, would be, you know, how does an elevated road or sidewalk meet grade of a private residence, right? And generally you either need steps or some kind of ramp that gets back down to grade. That's one example of the kind of design consideration or option that we would be looking at. But yeah, there's, you know, likely to be a significant need for coordination between the private residences that abut, or private residences and businesses that abut any elevated roadway, and that roadway itself in terms of accessing it. But it's not a simplistic question. It's actually quite a challenge that this project, should we move forward with an alternative that has an elevated roadway, we'll need to confront and design around.
Yeah, and just to add a little bit to that, Trevor, I mean, that is definitely a consideration as we progress down Easy Street. There's a section there that's really low, just under 3 NAVD 88, and all the residents are right at grade there. And we're really just showing kind of the minimal slopes required to kind of get a vehicle up and over to a kind of a passive type of flood protection system that doesn't require a gate, if you will. And that will, you know, just to reinforce, we'll need some level of coordination or little retaining walls or some means to separate that high elevation from access to those private residences. And those, you know, I encourage that we will get feedback on that and have to work through some of those issues.
Okay, great. You guys, other questions from the committee? Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, just quickly, I think you said this, but just to confirm it, can these alternatives be phased in over time? Or do you have to sort of pick one from the start?
I think, yeah, I think there is a way to phase these. You know, right now we're kind of presenting a menu of options and collecting feedback on what stakeholders are, you know, responding favorably to versus saying, you know, are no-goes or things that they wouldn't like to see among this menu of options. I do think there is a way to phase some of the components of this. So an example would be you could design something without knowing exactly what the Steamship Authority will do to Steamboat Wharf in terms of their resilience strategy there. We can phase a project that could integrate whatever happens there as part of the longer term solution in the future. So acting, you know, alternative one might be like a near-term level of protection, a near-term strategy that buys us benefits today or in the near future. Obviously, this won't be implemented today, but then could be integrated into the longer-term strategy for Steamboat Wharf if that's implemented in 2035, 2040, whatever year. You know, don't quote me on the year. We don't know what Steamship Authority is going to do quite yet, but yeah, the one thing I would say is it's not really possible to phase the linear protection. You need to have a comprehensive compartment. You can't just like replace the bulkhead along the Easy Street Park, for example. You need to have kind of a comprehensive line of protection along the waterfront in order to fully address the risk, because it comes from multiple different areas even today.
Thanks, Trevor.
Thank you.
Okay, other comments, questions from the committee? Bearing in mind that we are at 6 minutes from the end of the meeting and we may go over a little bit, Are we all good with going over to solve the rest of the agenda? Okay, Leah, go ahead.
I just want to make another plug that on August 7th, you all should come to the open house. We'll have breakfast stuff and also some dinner food for the later evening session. So spread the word. You'll be seeing some advertisements up through the Current and the Inky, and then hanging around town as well.
And what are those times again, Leah? Sorry.
So the morning session is going to be from 8 a.m. to 9:30, and it's drop-in. So you come and go as you please. And then the evening is 5:30 to 7 p.m.
Thank you.
I would also say, I forgot to mention this, but a lot of the information that Julie and I went through very rapidly is addressed in a significantly more detail in our existing conditions and flood assessment report and our alternatives report that I believe Leah shared with the committee. Those are relatively long documents, so you'd be excused for not having read them yet. But yeah, I think some questions could probably be answered if you have them by reading those documents.
Okay, great. Thanks, Trevor. Okay, if there's nothing else from the committee, are there any public comments? All right. So we will move on. Thank you guys for the presentation. We'll move on to number 10, next steps for coastal resilience updates to local regulations. So we've gone through the process of speaking with the chairman and sometimes vice chairman of the regulatory boards in the town, all with the goal of integrating coastal resilience policies into the regulations of these regulatory boards. Lee and I have been to the select board to inform them that this is the direction we're heading. And so our next step is to start looking at the regulations of these boards. And we're going to start with the planning board. And basically, I think we should start by basically reading those regulations. It sounds long and boring, but I think that the things that are that will have coastal resilience implications will sort of jump out at us as we read through them. And I'm not in any way saying that you need to do this for the next meeting. It's going to take a while to do this. If you need help, I think what we'll do is we'll provide you the link to those regulations so you can get there and start reading them on your own. And then check in at the next meeting, see how you guys are finding it. And that's my proposal. What do you guys think? Go ahead, Doug.
Thanks, Peter. No, that makes sense to me. I feel like there's a need to get educated first before I have before I am so presumptuous as to offer any suggestions. I also think it would be wise for all of us to review the CRP as it relates to zoning regulations, and I don't recall offhand how detailed the CRP, how much detail it went into. I know with regards to the wetlands regulations, there was a fair amount of detail. So I'm hoping that there may be similar deep dive available for us to get started with the CRP, and then understand it in the context of what the current zoning regulations look like. But that sounds reasonable to me.
Okay. Anybody else? Again, this isn't homework for the next meeting, so don't freak out. Okay. Number 11, public outreach ideas and strategies from committee members. Volunteers for social media. What am I doing with this, Leah?
So the thought is, so Doug was doing scorecards for quite a few months, and thank you so much, Doug. I know it was a lot of work. He is busy right now, and so I need help with, well, one, if we want to continue trying to do the scorecards, I will need help with someone helping me with that. And then as far as social media posting goes, at first we got like a lot of hits, and now we're kind of in a slump. So if there's any suggestions that members have, any other organizations that they're linked with that would share our information, that would be helpful. A lot of the kind of aligned organizations that we first spoke to, I think there were about 10 of them, kind of stopped sharing. So we haven't gotten as many impressions.
All right. Okay. Well, you guys think about that. Inky update by Tim Brain.
Yeah, not a lot to update. I think we probably would, one of the things we should do while they're kind of getting their act together about how they want to, and if they want to do more coverage of this topic, is to think and look for and sort of anticipate news stories that we think will be coming that we could then get them onto. And I guess, I mean, I'm happy to brainstorm that with somebody if they're interested in just sort of looking at what's coming and what would qualify as a news story for them. But I think that would be worth some thinking. And it could be, new funding that's coming, or it could be, plans that are being finalized, or, things that they will see as a legitimate news story. Because I think that they would like that probably. And in addition to whatever kind of broader overview kinds of articles they might consider. So if that's something I think we should think about. And as I said, I'm happy to work with someone on trying to come up with a list.
Well, it'd be great to know that they're getting our agenda. It'd be even better if their reporters would just attend our meeting. I'm sure they can pull things from it, but we can't just come up with stories for them. They're the newspaper. They should see the stories and then write about it. So
yeah, but we do know things that are coming our way that they can be alerted to. Anyway, that's sort of all I got at the moment. I don't think I think they're too busy. They'll probably get back to this in September. But so if anybody has any thoughts about that, let me know.
Okay. So Leah, have we lost our quorum?
Yep, I was just going to say that.
Okay, so what do we do? Do we just end the meeting, or what do we do?
Yeah, you have to end the meeting.
Okay, so we'll get to everything else later. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, a second from somebody.
Second.
Second from Gary Beller. Roll call vote. Doug Rose.
Aye.
John Kitchener.
Aye.
Tim Brain.
Aye.
Gary Beller.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Sorry, everybody. Thanks for sticking around. I appreciate it. We may have to make these meetings longer. Just kidding.